Andrew Cohen is an intentional investor only on Epsilon Theory YouTube. I mean, here's the big takeaway. The guy got blacklisted. He was part of Madoff. He was he was working there before the scandal on the legitimate side of the business. But doesn't mean he didn't build a life of meaning before it. Doesn't mean he realized he had enough to retire from the job. Well before. Even if he put all his money into the unfortunate fund, he did retire because he knew he had enough, survived watching it all go belly up, survived the lawsuits, survived the attacks, survived the association, survived being blacklisted for all this stuff. And now he's a successful professor at Old Dominion University. I love this story. You're going to love meeting Andrew Cohen. Jack Forehand, roll some clips.
It's amazing how the bagel is going to change my whole fate of my life. Who would have known this, right? It just so happens the freshest warm bagels that just came out happen to be poppy seed bagels. We have bad news for you. What do you mean bad news? Well, you failed the drug test. We are rescinding our offer. I'm like, I thought it was a joke. It might have saved my life, right? Because if I had stayed at Refco when 9/11 happened, I would have been blown to smithereens. I took the knife and I slashed his arm, and he was totally stunned. So I got a little reputation. All of a sudden, that's how I found out about the Ponzi scheme. A bunch of friends and people I haven't heard from in a long time from New York City all giving me a message. You hear Bernie Madoff's arrested. And I'm like, what the? Little did they know, I'm not trading there, but I left most of my money with him.
Yeah, and you're taking...
It was shockingly bad news for me.
Welcome to The Intentional Investor with Matt Zeigler, where he and his guests explore the intersection of investing and life, portfolio, and purpose. Nothing in this podcast is investment advice. Nothing in this podcast is advising you to buy or sell any security or to do anything with your money. Seriously, you should only act on investment advice from someone you know and who knows your unique situation. We are not that person. Matt Zeigler is a managing director at Sunpoint Investments, and the opinions expressed on this show do not necessarily reflect the opinions of Sunpoint Investments or of Second Foundation Partners. Securities discussed in the podcast may be holdings of Sunpoint Investments.
You're watching The Intentional Investor right here on Epsilon Theory YouTube. I'm your host, Matt Zeigler, and I'm so excited for you to hear this guest story, not just for the part of history that he was in the middle of, but it's the before, the after, all the things that go up into his character through with some pretty friggin' crazy times, because let's be honest, we're talking about Bernie Madoff and that whole thing. But how do you survive that integrity unscathed? Now, this guest, he's a Cohen with an H, but I think I can explain him with the no H Cohen as in the Coen Brothers movies. So if this guest, I'm going to explain him and set him up with Coen Brothers movies, which, quick splitter, are you a Coen Brothers movies fan at all? Is this going to be totally...
I am. I love his movies. I love Fargo. I mean, I've watched probably all of them.
Even better. I was really hoping that was going to be the case. Okay, so the first Coen Brothers movie adapted for this Cohen, No Country for Old Funds. And he'd be Ed Tom Bell, kind of the Tommy Lee Jones guy. Not Anton Chigurh, obviously. But still, maybe Chigurh would be Bernie Madoff in this movie. I can't get sidetracked, but why is he Bell? This guest is a moral center, and he hasn't already won for it. He's paid some serious prices, but he's still soldiering on. So let's go with another Coen Brothers flick. This one, The Big Lehman Ski. And no, he's not the dude here. The dude, like Lehman, was only interested in playing by his own rules. Presumably, it's bowling schedule and maybe whatever the opposite of Lehman Brothers Dickfold casual attire would be. And you must have had some great suits, by the way. I can only imagine. That old closet, were you really...
I had some nice suits. Actually, the best one I had gone to Italy on a trip, and I got a custom-made suit in Italy that I think I kept for at least 15 years because I didn't want to let it go. It started fraying, and I finally got rid of it, but that was my favorite suit. Yeah, that was beautiful.
I knew it. And last Coen Brothers flick for this guy. Oh, brother, where art thou, money? How's that for supersized Ponzi scheme tilting? Enough jokes and puns. This guest is a serious man of finance, fitness, and professional excellence. If you know his name is all, you know it because of the Bernie Madoff stuff, like I said. But the point is, he wasn't part of the fraud. He was a trader, a market maker, and he retired early, put his family savings into the fund, and got blindsided with the others. But none of it's derailed his life in the ways you might imagined it would, which makes it extra special to get this story for Epsilon Theory. All integrity here, people. My guest today, Andrew Cohen. Welcome to the show.
I think I'm looking forward to this. We will see.
Okay, if you think you're looking forward to it, then you definitely are. Full warning, we did an excess returns episode where we talked about the Bernie Madoff experience pretty explicitly, pretty in depth. I'm going to invite you, if you're watching this and interested, pair it with that excess returns episode. But right now, I'm just going all the way back to the beginning. You're born and raised New York City, right? Where in New York City were you born and raised?
I was born and raised in the Bronx, the northeast part of the Bronx, kind of a rough area that was changed dramatically as I grew up.
Okay. Talking about that, BX baby. But before, like, what mom and dad, like, why did they end up there? Who's mom and dad, and how do they end up in the Bronx?
Sure. Okay. Absolutely. Yeah. So, all right. I guess I'll do. So my mom and dad, total opposite personalities, opposite upbringing. My dad's family was very wealthy, Jewish family. My dad's mother, my dad's grandparents, I think they owned some factory, kind of the border of Poland and Russia. They were well-to-do, but of course, being Jewish, there was a lot of anti-Semitism, and so my dad's grandparents sent his mother with their sisters over to the United States to have a new life. And she was born in the 1890s. So my dad was 40 when he had me, and he was the youngest of his family. So anyway, then then she moved to the Bronx, and that's where my dad was raised. And my mom, on the other hand, came from a very poor ancestry where they came through Ellis Island, settled in the Lower East Side, kind of the Jewish ghetto, the poor, of the Lower East Side. My mom had a big family, and my mom married young. I have a half brother, half sister, but my mom's first husband died young of cancer. Later on, my mom met my dad, married, and I was kind of a miracle baby because my mom was 42 when she had me, and in those times that was pretty old.
That's absurd in those times. Yeah.
And the funny thing about my mom was this vivacious, fun-loving. She was a beautiful woman, very, very fun-loving. But she lied about her age the whole time. She was actually 2 years older than my dad, and I didn't know until she passed away. We all thought she was 2 years younger than she was because that's what she always went by. So, but my mom and dad were total opposites. My dad was my dad graduated high school at 16. He had a full scholarship to college, but then he went to war. As soon as the war started, World War II, he enrolled, and that kind of changed his whole life, not for the better. My mom didn't really go much to school or anything, but she had her own street smarts. She was very fun-loving. She loved to dance. I think she was the first person or neighbor to get like roller skates and would roller skate. And so she was a real fun-loving, hip, lady. And my dad was more straight. Like my dad would never dance. He would never do anything like that. But it was great as parents because they were so different. They each gave me love in different ways, and it was a nice balance. And they loved each other, so they were great parents for me.
That's awesome. I love they loved each other sentiment inside of that. Did you basically grow up as an only child, or
I did. Yeah. My sister is 16 and a half years older than me. I remember when I was real little, she was still living there, but she married very young. I think she married by the time she was like 18. I think she got married and moved out with, and I remembered, and she lived in the Bronx. So I remember her coming over with at that time, my brother-in-law, who would come over. They would give me toys and play, and so they were great. I really have very fond memories of that.
All right, what's young Andrew like? Like, what are you interested in? What are you doing? You just hanging out?
As a youngster, I was always hyper. I would crawl out of the crib and cause trouble, and so I think I gave my parents a real handful from the beginning. I from the time I was born, I was just always energetic and exploratory and everything. And so yeah, I think it was certainly the first few years of my life, I remember, it was a good, fun, loving kind of area. It was the building I lived in called 80 Towers was one of the first big co-ops that was, it was 20 stories high, which was tall then, filled with kids, lower middle class families. So it was a real fun family-oriented environment in the beginning.
How do you think the Bronx changed as you grew up? You were saying that earlier. So
It
what
was it
happened?
was amazing. So my building was almost all predominantly Jewish, upwardly mobile from lower middle class to upper middle class. And what seemed to happen is families just started moving out, I guess, to the suburbs. Families would make more money and then move to nicer areas or, like Scarsdale and Westchester. And so there became less families. And also the neighborhood changed, So I was born 1964. 1970s were really a bad time, I think, for New York City, where the drug boom started, the crime rate soared. I remember our car getting stolen occasionally. I remember even hearing, occasional gunshot out there and sirens, and it became a much rougher place. There was muggings, there was a lot more violence. And, our building, which was overall nice, was around, there was projects nearby, which I happen to have good friends who lived in the projects. It's funny, they looked at me as like a relatively rich kid, even though I grew up. To tell you, we had a very small 2-bedroom, shared 1 bathroom. And, that was, I don't know how many square feet. It must have been 800 square feet, which was fine then, but the neighborhood started changing, getting rougher, and I remember we then the building hired a security guard so people's cars wouldn't be broken into, and there was that whole 70s, New York City crime wave that affected us in the Bronx where we lived.
Sports, finance, interests. What are you into as a kid? Like, does business mean anything to you at this point? Is it just
No.
stickball?
No.
And what? Paint the card for me.
Sure. So my favorite thing was playing stickball. So we played
Was it
stickball.
really?
I would play stickball for hours with friends. Yeah, we had this little playground, and like even because all you needed was 2 of us, so that we'd get more. Sometimes we'd have games with a lot of us, but one guy pitches to the other guy. We had different rules. Like you had a big fence. If you hit it over the fence into the street, it was an out. But if you hit it over the whole street into this, there was this like little park. If you made it all the way to the park, it was a home run. And if you hit it like before the park, the sidewalk, it was a triple. Another area was a double. And, so we had all these rules, and that was a lot of fun. We played football. When we were little, we played tackle football without any equipment. I mean, we would just kill each other. And then as we got older, I guess then we got a little smarter. We played more touch football. And I remember one of my fond memories, every Thanksgiving morning, we would, all the neighborhood kids, we'd get into a touch football game, and we called it big kids versus little kids. The big kids had a big group that were about 3 years older than us, and we're actually about 5 or 6 years older than us. And there was a group of us that were younger. And so I was always in the little kids group, and that was fun. And, but yeah, I loved sports. I absolutely, I would play every sport possible. And I had no idea about finance or the stock market or anything like that. I was fortunately in school, I was really good in math. So, everything having to do with math came really easy to me. And I was a lazy student. I did enough to get by, but I wasn't really into sports. I wasn't into studying. I wanted to play sports and have fun. And, I had no idea what I wanted to do.
So when's that start to change? Like, is college on the docket for you in high school? Are you starting to think about that? Or
Yeah, definitely. So I went to, and one of the things I'm disappointed, I remember I tested and I got into this really, this school called, what was it? I think it's Ethical Cultures, Fieldson School of Ethical Cultures in the Bronx. It was like you had to test into it, and I tested into it, but it was a lot of money for my parents. And I told them, don't worry about it. I'll just stay in public school. And I wish I had gone there. It might have been a different, nurturing environment, because when I went to school, I went to this school, junior high school 113, and I was in the ESP program, which was, for the smarter kids, but it was a violent school. I used to come in with a knife. I mean, a lot of kids would get mugged. One time, I remember my first year there, I'm in there, I was maybe there 2 weeks. I go to use the bathroom. Some kid, he's probably 18 years old, comes behind me with a cigarette lighter, telling me, give me a quarter, I'm going to burn you. I'm like, what? I'm this little kid, and I was a small kid then, and I was a year younger than everybody in the class. So I'm this little kid and this kid's towering over me. I was frightened. And I remember giving him a quarter. And then he goes, all right, hey, if anyone bothers you, tell whatever his name was, and I'll take care of it for you. I said, can I go pee now? It was like, it was really a rough kind of environment. And I had to take the subway to school. So, I'm this little kid, taking the subway and, so it was a really rough thing. Some of my parents switched me to this other school in Co-op City that was safer. But I was in these classes I was so far ahead, like the kids I was with were just not very smart overall. And so I really wasn't learning much. It was really easy. Anyway, then I was switched to this private school, New Rochelle Academy, which was a smaller school where I had a partial scholarship, I guess, for my math skills. And so there I started putting a little more attention. I was actually the valedictorian of the high school, although I didn't really do much work, so I don't know why I was picked. And I remember having to give a speech, and I had no idea what to say. That's the first time I did any public speaking, and so so I gave a speech there, and then I remember my mom wanted me to apply to like Ivy League schools, and I had no interest. I wanted to go somewhere where it was good, but wouldn't be too hard. I went to the best state school, SUNY Binghamton, which was the highest rank in the SUNY program. And so I got into there, and that began my journey where I started actually becoming interested in a little bit in academia and actually studying. That's the first time in my life I ever had to study and put in time. And it was a really great experience. I loved my 4 years of school there.
All right. Well, let's without the questions about what was the knife that you had in your pocket. I mean, okay, we got to ask, like, what was the knife? Was it just like your regular pocket?
Yeah, it was some kitchen knife or something. I don't even remember the detail, but I remember this one kid was bullying me, and he was 2 years older than me and 50 pounds heavier. And so I told him, so I thought the only way for me to survive this is to kind of act crazy. So I told him that if he does that again, I'm going to stab him or something like that. And you're not going to do that. So when he went, and I took the knife and I slashed his arm, and he was totally stunned. So I got a little reputation for being this crazy. So it was good because after I did that, people didn't mess me. Oh, this kid, he's crazy, So that kind of was my way of kind of acting crazy, and yeah, it's the only time I ever anybody, but it was self-defense. I slashed his arm and drew blood. I don't know how old I was then, 13 or something,
So,
but yeah, it was a hostile environment,
I can only imagine. And was there any culture shock going from Bronx and obviously to New Rochelle, but then also out to Binghamton? And for people who aren't aware, like those are pretty big shifts. Was there some culture shock for you as you transitioned?
Yeah, in a totally good way. I didn't realize. So growing up in the Bronx, it's funny. Like I got used to the streets or whatever. And so I guess I got acclimated to it. I mean, I was also, I worked out a lot. So I got a little bit, even though I was small, I was kind of tough and at least buff, and did a little martial arts. But anyway, the point is, it was a cultural shock in a great way. All of a sudden, I'm in school with all these people my age that are also smart, that are interested. I don't have to worry about getting into a fight. I don't have to look over my shoulder about getting mugged. And the funny thing is, I had never really felt fear in my neighborhood until I remember going home for the first time. Like I stayed in school from August through Thanksgiving. And suddenly I come back in Thanksgiving and I look at our neighborhood, and suddenly I'm a little bit afraid. It was like, cause it's like, it's a rougher, there's a certain vibe of like this toughness that, you kind of get into. And so being in school was great. The culture shock,
That's so interesting. So what do you take to in school in SUNY Binghamton? What starts clicking with you as I see a life for myself with this? I want to learn more about this.
Yeah, so I took a whole bunch of courses, and I was interested in two fields that really excited me. One was psychology. I love learning about all the different psychological aspects, and so that was fascinating to me. And then I remember taking my first course about the stock market, and I remember reading Mal Keel's book, Random Walk of Wall Street. And it was like, this when I started learning about the stock market investing, it just clicked. It became so natural to me, like to understand that. I felt like I would read these books and get a deep and understanding level and go beyond it. And so in the classes, I would do, it was just easy for me. I picked it up really well. And so that was, I had no idea what a trader was, what a market maker until I started learning it. But the point was, it just, the whole idea of investing and analyzing stocks and all that was a natural progression for me. One thing I'll say too, one thing was good. When I was younger, like I loved Monopoly. I loved these games. I was always very good at them. I even like when I play with my family and everything, they hate playing against me because I almost always win and they always, so I'm still competitive in that, but I've always loved games, and the stock market in a way is like a big game, this game theory, strategy and so forth. So I took to that. I also was a very good chess player. My dad taught me how to play chess when I was 6 years old. And by the time I was 8 or 9, I was really, really good being a lot of high schoolers and everything else. And, but I didn't, again, by the time I was 9 or 10, I kind of got bored with it and stopped playing. But I was a really kind of almost like a young chess prodigy at one point. So also the whole game theory part.
Yeah. Less stabbings in chess generally too. What is that? You're a college professor now. So slight spoiler if people don't know from the intro or haven't picked up on it. As you think back of yourself when you're on the student side, when you're in the classroom, like young Andrew, the student now versus young Andrew, or not old Andrew, current Andrew, the professor, what do you think? What would you see in yourself as a student if you could look back on yourself with what you know now and seeing yourself then?
Sure. So this is the biggest thing that I tell all my students and my kids. When I went to school, I always thought of, I want to get an A in the classroom. And it was I wish I can go back and tell myself, forget the grade, just learn as much as possible. What you get an A or B, it doesn't, it's the knowledge that you learn that you take away from it. And of course, if you care about the course and learn the knowledge and be participatory and get to know the professor a little bit, you'll get the good grades, right? But the most important thing is getting that knowledge and taking that knowledge away, not worrying about specifically the grade.
That's a fantastic lesson. So what happens at the end of college? Is it the recruiters coming in? What's the situation for trying to line up work senior year?
Yeah. So I had, by the end of college, I was a bit cocky with I had done really well. I'd gotten, especially my last 2 years, I'd pretty much gotten straight A's. I was really good with public speaking. I was confident. And so I already had a couple of interviews. I remember I interviewed at Lord & Taylor and got an offer to be a buyer there. I had a couple of other opportunities and offers. But when Goldman Sachs was coming, and of course that was the premier firm, right, to try to get a position in. And so, and I remember talking with my roommate and other people about, we want to get an interview at Goldman Sachs. And so I even customized my resume to kind of fit with what I thought Goldman Sachs would like to look at. So I was very disappointed because the list comes out from the Career Development Center and I'm not on the list. And I was really surprised and, thinking that I would be a great candidate for them. I pursued it more. Turned out they had lost my resume or misplaced it or whatever. So the Goldman Sachs recruiter never got to see my resume. That's why I wasn't on the list. So one thing I wasn't bashful or shy. I went and found the contact number of I never forget, her name was Dee Owens at Goldman Sachs. Got her number and I called her several times till I finally got through to her, right? Because there was no emails at that time, certainly no texting. So I got through to her and she, I told her, look, I'd love to get an interview, et cetera, et cetera. She said, well, I'm really sorry that my schedule's filled up. But I guess I was persistent enough that she finally kind of grudgingly said, all right, if you on your own expense and time, you come to Goldman Sachs, I'll interview you there. So of course I took that up. 2 weeks later, I went to her office, had a great interview with her. She then set me up with a whole bunch of interviews. I think I had 7 more interviews. By the end of the day, I was getting fingerprinted and drug tested and polygraphed by some, tough looking guy. At the end of the day, I was like, are you going to arrest me or am I going to get a job offer here? So fortunately, it was 2 days later, it was the latter. I got a job offer at Goldman Sachs.
What's the job offer at Goldman Sachs? What's the first job in the business?
So I actually had 2 different areas of Goldman that were interested in me, but both were different types of operations. One was in foreign exchange, which was their and they had a separate company called J. Aaron. Another one was to work on the equity trading floor in operations. And I, of course, wanted to be close to the equity trading floor. So I went through their operations training program, which was a whole summer program. I learned all the different areas of the firm. And then I was going to be placed on the 29th floor, the trading floor, to kind of work and assist the traders and so forth.
Explain what, and this is early 80s now, early to mid 80s?
This is 1985.
Okay, so we're 85.
I was 21 years old, starting at Goldman Sachs.
Ready for the Plaza Accord and everything. What's it like? What's the job description? What's the actual job that you find yourself doing 1985 at Goldman Sachs?
Yeah, so my job is to basically, in those days, we had physical tickets. And so my first job was on the convertible bond desk. And I would basically, when they'd write all their tickets, I would get all their tickets and add up all their positions. And generally they would be hedged. They might be long a stock, short a convertible bond, long convertible bond, short stock, and all that. And I would make sure their positions were accurate and so forth. That was my main job. And so, I would total up, all right, they bought, 10 share, 200 shares of Pepsi, they sold 10 convertible bonds. And so I would just make sure the positions were updated. And that was mainly it.
What's the progression? So how long do you stay in that role? When do you get promoted? What's that look like?
Okay, so I wish I could have moved laterally because I really wanted to get on the trading floor. So what I did was, I took my GMATs, and I got a great score in the GMATs. And so I got into NYU at night. So my goal was to get my MBA at night, so that either two things: either maybe I'll get a break and lucky get a position will open up as like an assistant in the trading floor so I can get out of operations, or worst case, I do my MBA and then maybe I can get on the trading floor that way. So at any rate, so the first 6 months or year, terrible experience. I mean, I actually hated it. I had horrible bosses. They were kind of like old school bullies. They were still smoking. I've always been this kind of health fanatic. My dad was a heavy smoker, which ruined his life. I mean, he had emphysema. He was in such bad shape. And I remember as a kid not, wanting to get away from that smoke as much as possible. And now I'm in an environment where people could smoke next to me and I can't do anything about it until a few years later they banned smoking there. But so it was just for me, a different hostile environment, not worried about my health or getting into a fight, but it was just just a negative environment. And then at night I'm going to school for my MBA. So that was a challenge because I worked 50 to 60 hours during the day. I go over to NYU at night to take courses. And but at any rate, the progression. So fortunately, I had one great experience where I got selected to go to London. This is after I was here about a year and a half or so. I was the youngest one on their operation thing, and some of the guys that were married. I'm single, so I'm a perfect candidate to go to London to train people in London. And another great culture shock, because in London it was so nice there. They were more relaxed. Not much work got done after lunch because they'd all go to the pub. But hey, I had a great life in London. I had an expense account. I mean, lived, the work was great. And I was doing more creative stuff. I was helping with the technology. We were creating new technology, and I was helping train the new London people and learning the technology myself, which down there would help lead to other opportunities. To make a long story short, 1987, we have the big stock market crash. So unfortunately, all of us were pulled back. I wanted to stay in London. I had a girlfriend there. I was just in great life. But so I get pulled back to New York and, back to that same area. But fortunately, some people I'd met in London who are now managers, they kind of had me do some special projects for them, which made it interesting. All the while I'm continuing on with my master's degree at NYU. So then I got a promotion into management, back to foreign exchange, the original thing. They moved me to foreign exchange where I went into management. And then I had at one point like 20, almost 30 people working for me. And I didn't like it. I wasn't a good manager. And there was a lot of resentment because I was at this time when I was put in management, I was like 25 years old. Most of the people, they were older than me, like, who is this young guy coming in to manage us, So that was a rough environment. And I kept my relation with the trading floor. By this time, by the way, I'm friends with a lot of traders. I'm playing with them in these high-stakes poker games. And then we get into the most fun thing I've ever done gambling-wise, trading NCAA basketball teams from March Madness. And so I become this big market maker in NCAA basketball teams.
Okay,
You
wait,
know,
hold on a second. You're
sure.
friends with the traders. You're not on the trading floor yet?
No, I'm now
You're in
I'm
operations.
working a different floor in foreign exchange.
In
I'm a
FX.
manager. I'm managing a whole bunch of people to keep positions for the foreign exchange traders.
So
Most of my friends are still on the 29th floor trading.
you're
Equity
playing
stocks.
poker with the equity traders.
Yeah.
You're managing FX ops.
Yes.
But because of the poker games and because of the friendships, you end up in the hub as a market maker in the NCAA basketball tournament for the team.
Yeah. Yeah. When I got back from London and I was still on the 28th floor, that's how I got into it. That's how I started going to all the poker games and then doing the NCAA March Madness. So, and each year I got better. And then I took it up another level. I had a friend of mine who was an Excel whiz, so we kind of automated it. And now afterwards, it's fun. I even made markets in football teams after I was doing it all. That was kind of my crash course in learning how to be a market maker, right? Before stocks, I was doing it in basketball teams and football teams and everything I could do to gamble. I loved it. But that led to, obviously, I was hoping it would lead to they seeing how talented I was to put me on the trading floor. Unfortunately, it led to some animosity from some people who I made money off of. And worst of all, it led to some of the resentful people catching me on the phone, trading basketball teams while I'm supposed to be, managing the foreign exchange thing. But trading basketball teams is a lot more fun. And so, of course, word got out. I got in trouble, and my once promising upward trajectory in operations is now a dead end. And so, and then 1991, I'd finished my MBA. So now I've got my MBA, and now I can't wait to get out of operations to get into trading.
All right. Before we get 91 MBA in trading, the settlement process inside of Goldman for this. I think we're past the window of anybody can be upset about this. How'd you settle the trades? So you're managing it. You're looking at the Excel sheets. You're basically doing arbitrages and other things.
Yeah.
Is it a cash settlement business? Is it like?
Yeah. So basically,
bar
no,
every
you would all settle at the end. So in other words, okay, let's say I'm trading with you, Matt, all right? And let's say you want to buy Duke. So you buy 10 contracts of Duke at $70, all right? Now, if I don't trust you and I don't know you, I'm going to make you put up the money. So some people I did. So if you buy 10 contracts of Duke at $70, you're paying me $700, trusting me that if Duke now wins the whole thing, you're getting $350 a contract, so I'm going to pay you $3,500 back, okay? And so for some people, I made them pay up front. But for some of the big garbling traders, they don't want to, it's a trust thing. So it's like at the end, we net settle. So for example, if you don't pay me anything and then Duke does win, right? I'd pay you $3,500 minus $700. I'd pay you the net $2,800, right? All right. So for some people, I made them pay me up front. For others, I had this, balance. And now you also got to make sure that they don't say, because what if they say, oh, I never sold Duke or I never did this, right? So there was kind of a good honor system for most of it. It was good. And, of course I had everything on Excel. Every time I did a trade, had my friend George would, match it up. And so I would confirm and say, hey, I just want to let you know, this is our position going in. Let's confirm that, I would do that because I was trading with 30 different people or more. And I had all these trades and positions. We keep our risk management. I don't want to be short too much Duke or long, too much Kentucky. I tried to hedge it out. And sometimes I would go to market makers elsewhere. And here's one of the issues, because I had this one guy at Goldman who was a real jerk. And he had access to another firm where the year that UNLV won the tournament, I think it was 1990, it might have been 1991, when UNLV, I think, beat Duke in the finals. And so a lot of people, I was short a lot of UNLV, and I thought UNLV was going to win it. They had Larry Johnson. They had a great team. So to hedge myself and actually to go long UNLV, I bought a whole bunch of contracts at this other firm. So I was long, so to make me net long UNLV. So at the tournament ends, UNLV wins. So I owe a whole bunch of Goldman Sachs traders some money. I pay them all. Meanwhile, this guy at Goldman, who's a big-time sales trader, he starts delaying me because he owes me like $10,000, right? It's a good, big number, certainly for me then. It was a pretty big number, might even been more. And he keeps delaying me, and I'm getting frustrated. So finally, I go up to his desk, and I grabbed him, and I said, I want it now. And then he was afraid, and he read me a ticket. He goes, I could have you fired. And I said, you'd be doing me a favor. And I said, and I can't wait to get you outside and whatever. But I was, I had a temper then. And, and so, anyway, I got the check. And, obviously, there were, like I said, there were things I did that were bad in the long run, right? So,
well, hey, this is the
some of my Bronx toughness came out there.
This is the banking function of the NCAA tournament. Did the Christian Laettner thing, did that screw anything up, or that was expected enough? That was
okay. So we had the Christian Laettner shot when they beat Kentucky.
The shot.
Well, it's funny. So it had a good friend of mine.
Years right? That was like 91 or 90-ish.
I think it was 90. I think it was 1990. Okay. I remember that. I'll never forget that because I had a friend of mine who through me, he was long a lot of Duke and short a lot of Kentucky. So if Christian Laettner had missed that shot, he would have owed me a ton of money, and I would have been afraid he probably wouldn't be able to pay me, and it would have ruined our friendship. But that ended up costing me some money. But in a way, I was kind of relieved because that helped him make some money, and it was good. It was and I had one of my best friends was always along Duke, so I'm glad a different friend who I wasn't worried about the money. He was always betting Duke, so I'm glad he made some money. So, but I think, the year I won the most money was when Michigan won the championship, and the big game was when Michigan beat North Carolina to get there. North Carolina was favored, and Michigan was trading at a ridiculous discount to North Carolina. So I took a big chance. Not that I was sure Michigan would win, but it was like Michigan was underdog by 2 points, but they were trading like a huge discount to North Carolina. So I bought a ton of Michigan, shorted a ton of North Carolina to hedge myself. I bet North Carolina with the money line. So I really couldn't lose, but Michigan won. And then what happened too, Oklahoma lost in the other bracket. So Michigan then had an easy road to get to the final. So that made me a lot of money. So that was a big windfall there for me.
So 1991, you got the MBA.
Right.
What happens? So now you're blessed with academic titles. What do you run off to do next, or what changes for you?
Well, I want to stay at Goldman Sachs. I mean, they were the best, and I'm hoping to get on their trading floor. So I know them. I get all these interviews, and I feel like I have all these great interviews. I explained all these strategies, like they were into it. I explained how I made money doing this and all that. I thought the interviews went great in all these different areas, but I keep interviewing. I don't get any offer. They don't say anything bad. I mean, I must have had over 20 interviews all over the place with trading. Then I even go, this is kind of ironic. So I'm taking my final year, I'm taking a business ethics course. And I forget, my teacher was a guy named Lawrence Zicklin, it was like a Zicklin school. I don't know if that's from him or his brother. Great professor, loved the guy. And he was kind of like, and we got along great in the classroom. And he knew one of the partners of Goldman Sachs. So through his contact, one of the partners set me up interviewing the sales trading, because I was one of his top students. So he liked me, and so I had interviews there too. But I don't know, I almost feel like I was blacklisted because of the trading. It was a bit of a scandal. I didn't tell you this, but during that time when I got in trouble, there was a big article in the Wall Street Journal. It was on the Heard on the Street column talking about traders spending more time trading basketball teams than stocks. And it mentioned Goldman and other things.
A bad look for the whole firm, like
the whole firm. Yeah. Goldman among other firms. And so since I was kind of caught doing it, they were worried about me hurting their reputation or whatever. And so not just me, but there were some other traders who were really talented who I played poker with. We're all doing it big time. And all of them ended up having to leave Goldman Sachs. Like all the people that were like me, like the big market makers in this, all ended up leaving. So I think I was blacklisted because I'm telling you, I had great interviews and I thought sure I was going to get some kind of offer. I mean, even in the interview, they like the head traders would love it, but there must have been one of the partners must have said, don't hire this guy. I'm like, so finally, after all that, I start saying, all right, I guess I got to go interview elsewhere. And that's where I started doing.
So let's talk about these interviews, because you got the big famous one, but you got some close calls with another chef that turns into even closer calls later. What's the story of the interviews trying to leave Goldman?
Yeah, so I was interviewing to try to become a trader, and I was totally upfront about my proclivity in a way to gamble, although I didn't consider it gambling because I considered it, just like trading. I mean, when the odds are in your favor, you make bets. The bigger the odds in your favor, the bigger the bet you make. And I explained my strategies, how I would reduce my risk. Some things I learned about counterparty risk, like the guy I had to kind of threaten who, to get the $10,000 then from my UNLV long positions. So, all that was great experience. And of course, I talked a little bit about my MBA from NYU, and I had professors that gave me recommendations. So, I thought I was a really strong candidate. And I thought I was going to get an offer at, where was it? It was at Bear Stearns at the time. I thought I was going to get some other offers, but the market was a little bit soft. And anyway, the first offer I got was a company called Refco, which was to trade foreign exchange, starting off in the evening. And they were near the top of the World Trade Center, which was exciting and great for me because I was living downtown. So I loved the idea of walking to work. And so when I got the official offer from Refco, this contingent upon a drug test, I went and gave my notice at Goldman Sachs. I gave my 2-week notice. And I also was interviewing at a little boutique firm. And another quick irony, I heard about this firm from my partner, George, from the NCAA basketball trading, right? He was my Excel and partner in this whole thing. And one of his friends was friends with Mark Madoff. And she told him that, yeah, they're looking to expand. So I remember getting Mark Madoff's number, and he was my first contact with the Madoffs. I called Mark Madoff. I think I caught him at a time because I think it was near the close of trading, and then he called me back and set up an interview. So my first interview there was with his younger brother, Andy Madoff, and Mark in the trading room. And Mark loved the fact that when I was doing with the NCAA basketball futures, and I even threw and I explained how I used the Black-Scholes model to kind of evaluate, various teams and so forth based on, game theory and probability and volatility and all kinds of other things. So anyway, so that was good. But Refco was my first choice.
So you do these interviews, Refco's your first choice, a little bit about game theory. Are you like posturing here a little bit? Are you playing them off each other at all, or?
Well, no, I mean, Refco had gotten the offer. It was a good offer. And then so what happens is the day that I'm going to take my drug test at Refco is also the day that I'm supposed to have my final interview at Madoff. And I was almost going to blow off the interview, but I was like, all right, I don't want to blow it off because, and I meet with Peter Madoff, Bernie's younger brother. And it's a real long interview. It's an interesting interview because he didn't ask me anything about stocks or trading. It was a deep psychological analysis. He asked me things like you're asking me about, I hope you don't end up like him. No, I'm just kidding. He asked me about my childhood and, who my best friend is, my family life, all these kind of things. It was long, very detailed. And at the end, I'm kind of getting antsy because I'm scheduled for my drug test and now I'm running late. And so finally, but I answer all his questions. So the interview ends. And of course, this is in the Lipstick building, 53rd and 3rd, between 3rd and Lexington. Refco and everything is down at the World Trade Center. So I got to now zip down there. I'm really hungry. And so right on the way to the subway on 53rd in Lexington, there's this bagel stand. And it's amazing how the bagel is going to change my whole fate of my life. Who would have known this, right? It just so happens the freshest warm bagels that just came out happened to be poppy seed bagels. If they were sesame, I would have had a sesame seed bagel. But it just so happens to be poppy seed. I like poppy seed, no problem. I grab the poppy seed bagel and I go on the subway. And by the way, here's an irony. I remember this. On the subway, who do I run into? But I run into my professor from NYU, Larry Zeigler, who, by the way, knew Bernie Madoff and recommended Bernie. He said, oh, Bernie's a great guy. they're involved together in some of the charities. And so, like, all right. I said, well, I said, I just had an interview there, but the truth is I'm on the way to Revco to take a drug test. That's my first choice. So, all right, well, he says, good luck, best of luck for you. Either way is good. And he had to give me a recommendation. So I eat the Papa's bagel. I go to Revco. They, ask me a whole bunch of questions. Of course, there's no question that I eat poppy seeds. They didn't say poppy seeds. They asked me if I've ever used drugs or anything. Of course, the answer is no. And so I pee in the cup, and then I figured I'll get an answer soon and start at Revco. But I don't hear anything. Hear nothing. 3 days go by. I finally call up, like, what's going on? Oh, I'm sorry, we have bad news for you. What do you mean bad news? Well, you failed the drug test. We are rescinding our offer. I'm like, I thought it was a joke. I said, are you joking with me? So I said, well, test me again. There must have been a mistake. You must have switched the urine with someone else. I know plenty of people using drugs down on Wall Street. And so they wouldn't do it. They were so sorry. That's it. I'm like, oh my goodness. So I found out from a friend of mine who worked at Pfizer, my friend Charlie, who's a really sharp guy. He asked me if I had had any poppy seeds. Of course, I said, yeah, but what does that have to do with anything? That's how first I knew that poppy is a derivative of an opiate that could give a false positive on this drug test. So I figured, well, that must have been it. I ate a poppy seed bagel, and that's so. To make a long story short, Revco won't budge. So now I gave my notice at Goldman. Now I have to accept at Bernie Madoff's firm, and so I accept there, and my whole life changes. I went from being a downtown guy to a midtown guy. Went from, working trading foreign exchange and down near Wall Street by the World Trade Center to moving uptown. And by the way, I had two really good friends. I can tell a lot of bad lawyer jokes, and I'm generally the negative disposition of lawyers, but I had two really good friends who were great guys, and they took my case against Revco. And they settled. They retested me. They gave me this real detailed analysis. So I just want to clear my name. Of course, I came out totally clean and got I forgot what the settlement was, over $30,000. I think I was going to split it 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, but they said, oh, you can take most of it because, they didn't do a lot for it, but whatever. So it looked like a great thing because meanwhile, I love I'm working at Madoff. I start doing really well, and so initially it looked like a great, in a way, the poppy seed, well, who knows? It might have saved my life, right? Because if I had stayed at Revco when 9/11 happened, I would have been blown to smithereens in theory if I had stayed there. So
Floor of the world.
poppy seed could have saved my life.
It's a profound statement. It's a profound thought. It's wild to think about. So you get to Madoff. And this is disclosure for anybody listening. You want the whole story on this part, definitely check out the excess returns episode, but we're at least going to coast through this at least a little bit here because it's so interesting. What are you doing at Madoff? What's your job there? Are you in the equity trading position that you wanted to be in?
Yeah. So Madoff was the largest third market making business. So we made markets in listed stocks. So in other words, big stocks, IBM and Philip Morris and Intel and, any of the big stocks. We were market makers in it. And the edge was the reason, and it was a brilliant strategy by Bernie, if he had thought of the whole thing, I guess, we would pay a penny per order flow. And so therefore, if Charles Schwab and Ameritrade and all these discount brokers, right? Why go to the New York Stock Exchange? They can come to us. Instead of paying the New York Stock Exchange to take the order, we're paying them to give our order. So, of course, they make money, and we guarantee the same market that New York Stock Exchange does. Our overhead, though, is small. And so because spreads, when I started there at the time, were an 1/8 to 1/4 point spread, even paying a penny, say, on each side, we had an edge. So being a market maker gave us an edge. We saw all the order flow. Hopefully, most of the order flow was fairly, innocent. It wasn't a lot of sharp people trying to pick us off. We get some sharp customers that would pick us off, but for the most part, it was a positive sum. Just like I was making the market in the NCAA basketball teams and having a spread, the difference in the bid and the ask, right? We had an edge, and I was good at maximizing that edge. So I learned it right away. I mean, Andy, after I was there a week or two, he starts giving me more responsibility, and so eventually I get my own account. I became one of the most profitable market makers. I kept adding stocks to it. I loved it. It was fun. I eventually I had the biggest accounts, making the most money. I had 2 or 3 assistants, and so I'm making a ton of money. Then by 1999, I started. I got married in 1997. 97, I got married, and I started getting a little burnt out. So it wasn't as much fun anymore at the end, but I did really well. I think my last year I was kind of a little out of it, but I still made a lot of money. Um, but yeah, it was great. I mean, it was a great experience. It was overall a great culture. At least the part that I saw, we played once a year. We play softball against the Mets brass on Chase Stadium. Bernie had this great party once a year in Montauk. For a whole weekend, he would treat for everything. Of course, what a generous guy, right? What a generous guy.
Generous.
He would treat for everything. We had lobster and open bar and the works. And, when I was single, I would bring girlfriends with me. And then when I got married, of course, I took my wife there. And it was a great atmosphere. It was fun. And I was having, I guess, overall a great life there.
So before we get to the 99 burnout and you decide and you're going to change your life up a little bit, I do want you to tell this story because I just think this is fantastic. Talk about your wife, your now wife, for a second. Where do you meet her? How's this? Because you didn't meet a Wall Street woman. This is not a lawyer. This is not an investment banker. Tell the story of where and how you met your wife.
Sure. So I had my girlfriend before my wife, an Italian lady who she was into dancing and some ballroom dancing. So that's kind of so I got into it. We broke up. She moved to California, but I liked dancing so much. It was a great way to meet women. It was so much fun. So there's a place called International House, which was on 125th Street. So it's kind of in the western part of Harlem, kind of near Columbia and Barnard and where all the schools were. And this was an amazing place because it was, I think my wife would know better than me how many different countries of people were there, but there were students there, living there, from over 50 countries, maybe 100 countries, speaking all different languages. And so once a week, they would have, I think it was every Wednesday, they had ballroom dancing lesson and open dancing. And then a couple times a year, they'd have a ball. So I got to be a pretty good dancer. And I'll never forget, this was now, I guess, 1996 or 97. Anyway, so I go to the ball. I'm in my tuxedos, a ball, and I'm dancing with different women, and I meet my future wife, who I didn't know at the time, my wife Rita. See this beautiful young lady there, and of course I asked her to dance. We do the tango, and so you could say that I literally swept her off her feet because we did the tango, and it was great. We had a lot of fun, and she was, we definitely had a connection. But no big deal. I mean, that night I was dancing with a lot of different ladies, and then a couple times I ran into her a few more times at like a party or event because I kept going to International House to dance and have a great time. And then there was when I finally asked her out. So there was this fellow nicknamed Herman Rottenberg, or HR was his nickname. Very wealthy guy. He kind of ran a lot of the events at iHouse, and he had this beautiful apartment in the top of the Majestic. Majestic is a very fancy building right on Central Park West. I lived around the corner from there. And so he had this party. He had these amazing parties where he had tons of performers. So he had a lot of the students from International House, a lot of talent there. Opera singers, dancers, belly dancers, all kinds of different musicians. And so I was invited as a guest. Turns out my wife was there as a performer. She was singing. She did an aria singing opera. So I was there, and I heard, I first of all, she's beautiful, she's sweet, she's nice. And then I hear her saying how talented she is. So after she sang, and we were, I started talking to her, and then, she gave me her number, and I said, I'll give you a call. We'll go out for dinner. And so, a few days later, I called her, we went out for dinner, and that was it. After that, we were together a lot. Eventually, she moved in with me into my Upper West Side apartment. And, got married like 6 months after that. And then our daughter was born 9 months after we were honeymoon married. So my whole life was changing. And I had this really nice, a great apartment between Central Park West and Columbus on 71st Street.
And I think this is extra important because, that's a lot of life change at once. You find your wife, you meet your wife, you get married to your wife, you almost right away are having a baby. The business is booming. I mean, you're working your ass off through this period. The late 90s were all sorts of crazy between the 97 craziness that happened right there and then into the tech bubble as it really started to ramp off. How and why did you start to burn out a little at work or feel like you might be done?
So one is our daughter Chloe, who's the most amazing young lady, right? She's great. But when she was a baby, she was so demanding. She had colic, which I remember one time I took her out to the park in the baby carriage, and she starts screaming and crying. I don't know what to do. What do I do? I think I took her to the emergency room because I didn't know what's wrong. And and anyway, the point is, I'm not. When you have a baby, and I want to be the dad that's there for my kid. I was sleeping horribly, and it's again totally different life. So I'm not sleeping well, and I'm not focused on I'm not excited to be trading anymore. And by this time, I had accumulated quite a bit of money, and so then in what the final trigger was in 2000, beginning of 2000, my wife had sacrificed her career for me. She had an amazing voice instructor. She was getting some gigs. Of course, then, she marries me. She gets pregnant right away. Of course, the voice instructor, dropped her and they see a pregnant woman. It's, obviously, so unfortunately for her, it hurt her career, right? So anyway, so then she gets this opportunity to sing in Charlottesville in the summer festival. And I was like, you know what? Let me be a good dad. Let me help her out. Let me take care of Chloe during the summer and let her sing. And so I went into their office, said, well, you know what? I'm ready to retire quick. And they were like, what? And I was 30. I was just turning 36 then. I'd been there a while. And they couldn't believe it. And they kept talking about the money. And they didn't like it that I was just leaving. And they started treating me differently. So it was it was an animosity. There was a lot of animosity, and the relationship soured. Really, the last 2-3 months is very stressful there. And I wish at that point that I had, because of the stress, I wish part of me said, let me just take all my money out of there and be done with it because this is something wrong. It's negative. But I didn't take my money out because I was getting decent returns. And then after I moved down, Mark Madoff kind of called and apologized and was like, because once they realized that I wasn't going to like a rival firm.
Who believes somebody when they say I'm not? Like I'm 30 something, I'm retiring, I'm done, and it's not about the money. Like they just literally probably didn't believe you, right?
Yes, they didn't. I mean, yeah, I was making good money there. I never complained about the money that I was making there. But anyway, and after that I would come visit. When I'd go to New York, I'd visit the trading floor and say hello and so forth. And it wasn't like I was good friends with them anymore, but it wasn't, it was a cordial relationship. I'd pop up and say hello but anyway, yeah, that was the trigger. I moved down, and then from 2000, living in Virginia Beach, to 2008, I was living a great life. I was gotten the most fit I ever been in my life. I'd gotten every fitness certification I could get, got my black belt in Taekwondo. I did other martial arts. I became a pretty good beach volleyball player. I'm trained. I got to the point where I could jump up and touch the rim, and I'm not even 5'7", so I had to really jump high. Okay. Whoa. So I had some hops. I was incredibly fit. I loved training people. I was teaching yoga. It was great.
And you're raising your kids, like you're dad too, right?
Yeah. We had our son Orion was born, and I loved being. I always wanted to be the dad that would spend a lot of time with the kids. That's one of the things. And I told you in the other interview, one thing I am proud of is that I wanted to make money to give myself freedom, not to make money to accumulate, materialistic things. I mean, I've never really, cared about fancy things so much. I'm a casual guy. I wanted a really nice place to live, though. But anyway, so that was great that it afforded me the time to be there for my kids and have hopefully give my kids a great upbringing, a great atmosphere.
Yeah, really, really incredible. So everything's going great. You're raising the kids, you're teaching fitness, you're even teaching yoga class sometime in 2008 when your cell phone starts going crazy. What the hell is your phone blowing up for in the middle of your yoga class?
Yeah, yeah. So I told this before, but yeah, all of a sudden I get, that's how I found out about the Ponzi scheme. A bunch of friends and people I haven't heard from in a long time from New York City all giving me a message. You hear Bernie Madoff's arrested. And I'm like, what the? And, I'm stunned. And I've always been an optimistic person. So I'm thinking, all right, what's the bright side? All right, well, you know what? I've been paying taxes. I've immediately thought, all right, it's not be so bad. Even though I lost most of the money that I had, the government's going to owe me a lot of money in taxes because I pay taxes on fictitious profit. So it's no longer a profit. I should get back a ton of money. I'm like, I'll be fine. I'll be able to live on that. So I was depressed. Believe me, I was upset. But I was quick. I was getting over it.
So you think you're going to be okay. And let's recap this for the audience, just because I feel like this is so important. I want to make this really clear for the audience. You knew what you wanted and that you wanted to buy your freedom. When you had enough money and the stress and, you're newlywed with a child, everything's going on, you basically say, like, I have enough. Like, I've got what I need to buy my freedom. And you take that money for your freedom and you basically, with the firm, with Bernie Madoff, you say, here's the money. Like, here it is. You say, yeah, it's okay. I'll let you into the secret club. And I think it kind of goes like that, right? Did you get access to the Madoff fund right away? How'd you get brought in?
Oh yeah. So as far as the Madoff fund, I was there about 2 or 3 years at least. It was after I had got my own account and started making more money, and Bernie started, I guess, taking notice of me because I was successful and seeing me around. But what really got, one of the things that kind of boost me in the eyes of Bernie is we had this 1 year, we only did this 1 year, we had a secret Santa. And so we had every employee at Madoff was involved, including the back office. So it must have been at least 70, 75 people. So everyone's name was in a hat, and I pick a name out of a hat at random. And who do I pick? I picked Bernie Madoff. So I am Bernie Madoff's secret Santa for this year. All right. And so, of course, I want to impress the boss. So I found out from his secretary, Eleanor, what he liked, because he was always smoking these cigars. I know nothing about cigars, but at any rate, of course, I go and buy his favorite cigars, this nice, beautiful box with a nice note. And so when he sees that I'm the secret Santa, got him these great cigars, he really appreciated that, took more of a liking to me. And so I would talk with him. Sometimes I would, by chance, I would see him on the way into the lipstick building. And it was funny because I'd usually be on my rollerblades. That's how I would get to work. So I lived as I made more money, I moved to different places. I started off on the Upper East Side, made it to the Upper West Side. But the point is, I would rollerblade in and he would get a laugh out of that. And we would talk. And so he got to know me, he got to like me. And of course, I liked him and I wanted to impress the boss. So I would overhear from other people talking about Bernie's real successful business, right, on the 74th, that he had this money management that he's really successful with. So since I see on the 19th floor, the trading floor, which is a brilliant business, he's making a ton of money, I'm thinking, he must have some angle with this money management. This guy's a winner. This guy's, a brilliant guy. He had been chairman of the NASDAQ. So who better to manage my money than Bernie Madoff? So I approached him and asked him about, could I give him some money to manage? And of course, he makes it seem like he'd think about it, and the big thing is he doesn't want a lot of people to know about it because he doesn't want other people to get jealous. So anyway, I'm like, all right, whatever. So 2 days later, he's on the trading floor and he goes, Andrew, come here. I'm like, okay. So I come in and he pulls me aside and he makes it like he's like an uncle is taking me under his wing. All right, I'm gonna manage your money, but look, I want you to not tell other people about this. I don't want them to get jealous. I don't want you to be asking me questions. I'm really busy, and blah, blah, blah. So I'm like, all right. So I start. I remember the first time, I think it's the only time I went down to the 74. I remember dropping a check off, or I believe I went down and gave him a check. And then what I would do is that after the returns started coming in, and of course I would carefully analyze the positions initially, and after a while, when the returns are steady, you look at it less and less. And then I would put more money in here as I made a lot of money from my bonuses. I would basically, from trading, I would get 25% of everything I made the firm, less I would pay overhead. Like I would pay my assistants, I would give them their bonus out of mine and so forth. But anyway, I was making a good living, and I would take a lot of that and just put it in Bernie's fund. So, and it was doing well. So that's how I got invested.
So a good chunk of your nest egg is sitting in that fund. Like when your
Yes.
phone is going off in 2008 and they're saying, hey, this is fraud, that's a good amount of your net worth too.
Most of my net worth, yeah. And some of them were laughing, thinking that I got out. Oh, you're lucky you got out when you did. Little did they know, yeah, I'm not trading there, but I left most of my money with him.
Yeah, and you're taking...
It was a terrible, it was a shockingly bad news for me.
Yeah, and luckily nothing bad was going on in the world in 2008, so, you're immune, right?
There was a heck of a lot going on in 2000. Well, I guess that was the irony that before that I was thinking, all these people losing money on their funds, boy, am I lucky I had with Bernie Madoff, because until October, or until November, it had been holding up well, and I was actually surprised that, I'm still making good returns. Thank goodness I got Bernie Madoff fund, Thank goodness I don't have it in, Bear Stearns or Lehman Brothers or, losing all this money in real estate.
Oh, boy.
Joke's on me at the end, because at least maybe they got some money back. They didn't get a clawback lawsuit against them to boot, a little bonus factor for me.
Yeah, go to the excess returns interview for the clawback lawsuit and that whole story, because that's brutal and amazing in its own right. All right, so you lose this money. Are you thinking I got to go back to work? You're looking at your wife and your kids, and you're saying, so how do you process this?
Yeah.
Because again, like what you just said before, like, oh, I'm lucky. All these other people losing their money, then got them in Bernie's fund, but then it ends up being infinitely worse, and that it's gone.
Yeah. So first of all, I thought I would get more money back from taxes, and I didn't think in wildest dreams I would get a clawback lawsuit against me. So, I thought my wealth would be cut significantly, but I'd be fine, right? And, my wife's great, because I joked that I know she didn't marry me for my money because, after that, because when I came back, what can I do? Can I help? Can I get a job? So my wife, Rita, was great, and one of the positive side effects from this bad event was our relationship actually got better after this, because I think before that, I had provided all the money, and, we were very well off. And I think she felt like maybe, and she's 10 years younger than me. Okay. So at this point, when I find out, I was, I guess, 40, what was I? It was 2008 when I found out. So I was 44 years old or thereabouts. She's 34. She really, her dream was aspiring opera singer, and she really hasn't, she's been taking care of the kids and not doing much. And so, trying to get an occasional opera gig here and there. But at any rate, so our relationship actually got better because she was supportive, and maybe she felt more important to me, because I don't know. But the point is, after Madoff, our relationship was just better. It was interesting, even though I was obviously much more depressed.
Yeah.
Maybe because and she was there to help me and cheer me up and everything else. And if kids were so small, I don't think they kind of understood what was going on. I think, well, see, so 2008, Chloe would have been 10, and Orion, our son, would have been 7.
So do you think you're going back to work? And this speaks volumes to just the support network that you have to have around you, where this can actually make your personal relationship stronger, even if it's made your personal finances weaker. Do you think you're going to get a job? What are you going to do?
Yeah, I think, well, maybe now I got to go back to work and do something. And I remember a good friend of mine from New York had seen, so I went on the CNBC interview. I was the only first one, dumb enough or brave enough, depending, whatever angle you want to take. You can call me dumb, whatever. And so I had friends of mine seeing that and saying, oh, and they had remembered me being, a talented trader and doing well, et cetera. So, they offered to set me up with interviews. And I'm like, yeah, I would love to. I'd consider going back to New York City, and actually my wife always loved New York, so we would have been fine going back to New York. But at the second time I'm blacklisted, nobody's going to even interview someone from Madoff, because they don't know, right? They don't know. Why would they hire someone from Madoff who could have been involved somehow, right? So I never got any interviews. And I was, then the clawback hit. So I was pretty depressed because, I mean, I'm a fitness trainer. I'm not doing it for the money. I'm not making much money. Suddenly, most of my wealth is gone. I've got now a lawsuit against me. I think at this point, I don't even have health insurance. I think I cut because I figured I'm real healthy, so I don't need it. So I even cut back all my insurance. I'm taking a little risk there. And so, yeah, financially, I mean, I don't know what's going on. Am I going to be bankrupt from this clawback? What's going to happen? So I was a pretty dark, depressing time from 2008 through the end of 2008 up until end of 2011.
Cliff's Notes version, the clawback is basically they say that money that you took out and you paid taxes on, you actually owe back, right? They put you in there. So just give the Cliff's Notes version of what happens where you also, as an investor in the fund, are now out your money, but because you had taken out money, paid taxes on it, it still wasn't looked kindly upon to you. And you had to fight this for a number of years without
9 years. So I didn't know a dark 9 years against lawyers and a whole legal firm, Baker Hostetler, that had unlimited funds. And I'm trying to, anyway. So anyway, again, two sides to it. I understand they're trying to, they have a fiduciary responsibility to get as much money from it as possible and so forth. And they certainly did. They did their job. They squeezed money out of rocks every which way they could, right? Now, my big contention with it was, it's one thing if I took out the money and held on to it, but they should have at least, I think, allotted for the money I took out and paid taxes on. So if they would have counted the money I took out to pay taxes, they wouldn't have gone after me for a clawback, right? I mean, let it be. Yeah, I lost the money. Don't give me money back, all right? I mean, for me, it's crazy. Like, you invest in a stock, you'd say you get dividends from it and everything suddenly, and you take up money and then you sell the stock, and then years later you find out that the guys were embezzling. So now you got to give back all this money, and even if you pay tax on the gains, anyway. I don't need to go there. We don't need a whole legal thing, but I thought it was unfair. Be it as it may, it's finally settled and I'm on with my life.
2010 or 11, somewhere in there, you realize you're not going back to finance. What do you decide to do with your life next?
Well, I mean, I was actually, let's see, I had been making a lot of money playing poker. So I'm still playing poker on the side. And I was actually become a great poker player, made a lot of money. Although after 2008, I wasn't as good anymore because I was depressed. I lost my focus. So that also hurt my, where there was a string where like I would take my family on vacations, and I can't tell you how many times in a row I made sure that every time I went on vacation, I made enough money playing poker that we pay for the vacation and more. And my wife hated it. I would always pick one night at least. I would go out to the casino. They'd go to bed at 10 o'clock or not, whatever, and I'd go out to the casino and I'd come back 3 or 4 in the morning. One time I remember coming back when she was just waking up and she was really pissed at me. My wife's, she has no vices. I mean, she thinks, everything. She doesn't drink. She thinks gambling's bad. She's like the most purest, person. My one vice in a way, if it was gambling, although for me it was fun. It's like a game, it's like playing Monopoly poker. But anyway, so I've been a really good poker player. I'd been going to the games, and when I go to the casinos, I almost always win. But then I had lost my focus. So not only did I lose all this money, I also kind of lost my poker skills in a way. I wasn't doing as well. But anyway, so I'm trying to figure out what to do. And then, fortunately, Old Dominion University, I had taught some MBA classes there back in 2001. And so they opened up this new Bloomberg trading room. And so they're looking to hire someone not to teach, but just to kind of manage the room. And so I guess they couldn't find anyone in-house because I would have been, in-house and so I then go for an interview at Goldman. Thinking back to my Goldman days at Old Dominion University. And, have a good interview. But I don't hear for a while. And now I guess what's happening there too is I think the provost at the time was a little bit worried about what would I, being from Madoff, bring any disrepute to Old Dominion University. So eventually I meet with the dean and he says, you got to meet the provost and talk to her about this. It was provost. And so I went with the dean, Dean Yoakum at the time, a great guy. Met with Carol Simpson, who was the current, not the dean, the provost. The dean was cool with it. I had to meet the provost, which that's why it's unusual. Of course, the dean is of the college, of course, going to meet with me. So Dean Yoakum walks me over to meet the provost, Carol Simpson, and I explained my role at Madoff and how I was a victim and the whole bit. And so after that, they hired me. And it's funny, I joked with the dean. I said, look, I have no idea if I'm going to like this. I'm either going to quit in 6 months, or I'll be one of the best professors or whatever faculty ever hires. So hopefully it's been the latter, because I loved it. And I tell you, being in academia has been wonderful. I've loved teaching there. I've loved managing the trading room. I love working with Bloomberg. I've loved the presentations there. And I just had the last class of the semester Thursday, and it was so great. And the students, I could see they all appreciated me. They all thanked me. It's so much better being in a place where you're helping people, like teaching, rather than when I was on Wall Street just trying to suck money out of it, So it's wonderful. So that, in a way, is a really good thing.
It's an amazing thing. And that's what, like almost close to 14 years now? I mean...
Yeah. Can't believe it's been this long.
Does it feel crazy that this is like again, you're back to this place, like, and I'm not asking you to divulge your personal finances in this, but it's like you have this job, you have this situation, and you seem genuinely content. Like you're not chasing anything extra.
Yeah, no, I'm comfortable. I'm good. Yeah, I'm good. I don't need a lot. And fortunately, my kids were great. My kids, I'd saved money in 529s for them anyway, but both kids got full scholarships to UVA, on their own merits. And so they've made it easy for me, certainly financially. My daughter is doing great. She's got a job working in, I hope it stays. She works in the Washington, D.C., she works in the D.C. government. So, but she's a wonderful person, really smart. She got her master's degree really young, and she's always been, a go-getter. And my son, too. My son's now working. He's doing AI for AT&T in Atlanta. It's a great first job. He also graduated with a double degree in mathematics and statistics from UVA. So fortunately, my kids are great. My wife's great. So I'm a very lucky guy that I have a great family, which is like the most important thing.
Well, I think this is a perfect part to say I took a couple of notes. I'm going to take you through some of these things. I just got to hit a few of these points because
sure.
I love this arc. And I will say this, as I'm going through this, because I know I wrote it in the columns, this arc of going from, and right up till the end, you got blacklisted multiple times along the way.
Yeah, so if I was back in the 1950s, I'm sure McCarthy would have blacklisted.
Right. All right. We'll hit on some of these things through the note. I love that the first Madoff of your life in a lie was your mom lying about her age. Like did she really carry that all the way to the end?
Yes,
like
she did.
Did you find
and she
out
dyed her hair red. She had this, I'm sure she was a brunette, but she was always known as the redhead, and she was a little vain, and she was a fun, she was never boring with my mom. She was always exciting and dynamic and fun.
That's a fantastic thing to grow up with. I got to ask about the Thanksgiving street football big kids versus little kids game. Like, especially as a little kid, did you guys ever upset the big kids? Any like memorable plays?
So what happened, of course, they would beat us when we were younger, but so we kept this game up after we were adults for a while. We would meet in the Bronx. We did this, let me see. It wasn't that long, but into the 1990s, we would meet up. And of course, at some point, we always beat them once things turned. But that was always a fun thing. This was touch football. This was in Bronx Park. We always met in Bronx Park. And what's funny is I always thought of this as this big area, but it was right between this like concrete sidewalk and the highway. I never noticed it as a kid. I remember when I got to be an adult playing there, I was like, holy shoot, we played right by these like cars streaming forward and everything. But yeah, that was, I missed that tradition because we used to meet up there and it's, of course, we stopped it, I don't know, 25 or more years ago, but
unbelievable.
That was a fun thing.
That's unbelievable. I don't know what the connection to this is, but it just, another one in my margins here. Learning to survive that you had to act crazy. So this is the story about the kid with the knife. But for some reason, I feel like it's connected to the post-valedictorian you later, where like the A was the most important thing. Like learning that I don't have to act crazy and scare other people who do this stuff. Learning that like the A is not the most important thing. Like the most important thing is that like I learn, that I survive and I learn. I think that's where I'm going with this. Is that the most important thing, that we survive, we live to fight another day, and we learn along the way?
Yeah, and you could take that with trading, for example. When I was a market maker, of course, even if I had a big opinion on a position, if it was going against me, I made sure to cut my losses because, again, survive, right, and live another day. And that's part of the discipline of a good market maker trader is making sure if you're wrong, you'll be okay, right? It won't destroy you. The idea is to get it, if you're smart, you have the odds in your favor, you want enough sample size. You want to have enough trades so that you can make the odds work in your favor. And think a few moves ahead, that's where chess comes in, thinking, if you do this, what's the effect of this and this and this? And, in some places, in some ways, like my doing the basketball pool and some of the things I did, I wasn't a good chess player there. I was thinking 1 or 2 moves instead of long-term. I wish I thought long-term because I don't want to do something that's going to make people upset at me so that they won't hire me, right? I should have thought to be a better team player, more like, less, so that I would get hired, right? Because that would have been a huge difference there. So those are other lessons along with what you said.
It's interesting watching those lessons, like hearing, and this is part of why I wanted this whole story from you, because you really see the way that evolves. I love, adore, will cherish the idea of the Christian Leitner shot saving a friendship. You're like, I'm worried about this guy. I'm worried about what this does for him. And then in an eighth of a second, you're like, oh, I saved a friendship. That might be a beautiful sentiment. The whole idea that the poppy seed bagel, I mean, I think it's got to be 97 when Seinfeld does the episode in Elaine.
It was much later. It
Yeah.
was, probably. So it was like 6 years
Your
later.
story contributed to the urban legends that turned into the Seinfeld legend.
I should have somehow monetized it, right, and done something, but hey.
Hey, it's never too late. Call them up and just tell them. But it's really amazing. You really can look at that poppy seed bagel and say, this could have changed your life. You could have been at the top of the World Trade Center had you passed that drug test. You've thought about this. This like creeps.
Oh yeah, definitely.
That's a weird thing, dude. How do you
Yeah,
reconcile
it did.
that?
There was no doubt it changed my life because let's say even if I was lucky, let's say I didn't eat the poppy seed bagel, I got hired at Repco. Even if somehow I left Repco and went somewhere else, my whole life would have been different because I wouldn't have been different friendships and things when I was uptown and versus downtown. I might never have met my wife and had kids, So there's so many. Yeah, that definitely. I mean, that changed my life for sure. It might have saved my life. I'm stuck. Oh no, there I go.
You're okay.
Yeah, I think my video got stuck for a minute.
We'll clean up that, and I'll have to hunt through to clean up my mishap.
Thanks.
Don't worry. How do you think about? And I almost want to say it's the poppy seed bagel lesson. I don't know if there's any way to teach that to kids or to students. I feel like that's a learned experience. We all have them, but you have to learn it and live it. Do you ever share that story in the classroom? Do you try to like tell kids about this? There's going to be some choices and some things along the way. You got to be prepared to roll with it.
Yeah, well, the big thing is sometimes things happen beyond your control. Like I had no idea at the time, like that I shouldn't eat a poppy seed bagel, right? There's when I was eating that bagel, there's absolutely zero thought in my mind that that's going to affect a drug test. I had no idea. So sometimes you don't know things, but when you have, I guess the idea is when things that happen negatively, you got to think, how do you make it a positive, right? What do you learn? The big thing I teach them is, learn from your mistakes. And, there's like a lot of companies that, have done well on the internet. The key is they make a ton of mistakes, hopefully small mistakes, and then they learn more. So they learn by their mistakes and they keep getting better and better. So part of life is when you make a mistake and something bad happens, don't be upset about it. Think what you learned so you can take it forward.
And maybe this is where I want to end this. And it goes back to this blacklist thing that I mentioned at the beginning of these notes, because you had the NCAA tournament in Goldman and you got blacklisted because your reputation risk to them and making money.
Right.
Then you have the Madoff situation and you try to go back into finance, try to look at this and you're blacklisted again because you're associated with this person. What's the risk? But then the provost sees you and you go through the whole thing with the hiring. And I feel like you demonstrated you learned from the mistakes. And that's where you finally shed, like, you can't blacklist this because I've learned these lessons.
Yeah, I guess, I just explained to her my role and how there's gonna be no disrepute and owed to you, except, you could say that this guy, you could call me an idiot or naive for investing in Madoff, but it's there's no criminal thing. I wanted to be clear that there was no, there was nothing like that. So, and actually, it's funny because some professors thought it was great that I worked at Madoff. So again, depending on the perspective, they said, "Oh, someone said you got to hire this guy. He's been in the belly of the beast. What great experience and knowledge." And so that is great because after I was there, but there was a lot of other professors that wanted me to talk to their class. Like there was different business ethics and things. And I was asked to speak at the Williamsburg Fraud Conference. Dr. Z, who was the department head for accounting, he had me on there twice. They paid for me to come speak, at the fraud conference. I was paid for some other gigs. So, of course, it's a fraction of what I lost, but, it's funny. So the point is some things like that makes it more interesting, right? I wouldn't have been on CNBC if I hadn't, haven't worked for Madoff. So there's some, indirect fun benefits from it.
Yeah. And benefits because you get to share stories from the other side in a powerful way, which is part of why I was so happy when you said you'd come on and have this conversation in public like this. Andrew, you're a wonderfully interesting person. If people want to find out more about you, if they want to send their kids to Old Dominion, where should they find you on the internet these days?
So I teach at Old Dominion University. If anyone wants to go there, take my Wall Street 101 FIN 220 class. But you can, I'm on LinkedIn. I'm not a big social media presence. My wife's on much more than I am, but I am on LinkedIn. And I guess they can always contact you, Matt, and then you could reach out to me.
I'll
right?
gladly send them your way. Get those comments, get those emails in. Let's get them over to Andrew and show him some love. Andrew Cohen, you are truly an intentional investor. I want to thank you so much for coming on today.
Great talking to you, Matt. It was fun.
Thanks for tuning in. Be sure to like, share, and subscribe wherever you're watching The Intentional Investor so more people can find our show. You can follow Matt directly at cultishcreative.com or at cultishcreative on Twitter. For more great content at the intersection of investing and life, check out epsilontheory.com or at Epsilon Theory on Twitter.